And now from a book collecting the works of Benjamin Franklin. Fart proudly. I do hope you can see that. Introduction. Everyone knows Benjamin Franklin was one of the greatest statesmen, scientists, and philosophers of all time. A successful printer and publisher in Philadelphia, he retired from active business in his 40s and spent the rest of his life serving his community and nation. He founded the postal system in this country, served as a colonial agent to Great Britain for 2 decades, led the protest against taxation, helped draft the Declaration of Independence, served as ambassador to France during the Revolution, organized America's first intelligence network, and helped write the Constitution that still governs this nation. As hard as it is to believe today, however, he was even more famous in his time for his discoveries in the field of electricity, advances that made it possible for Edison, Tesla, and others to make use of electricity practical 100 years later. Advances that made it possible for Edison, Tesla, and others to make the use of electricity practical 100 years later. One word, the. Just one, put in the right place, makes all the difference. That's how easy it is. It was his immense popularity as a scientist and philosopher in France that enabled him to serve so effectively as ambassador there and gain France's aid for the colonial cause. Franklin was also an inveterate tinkerer and is responsible for dozens of practical inventions, from bifocal lenses to the Franklin stove. Remind me to look up Franklin stove. I'd imagine there's something on Wikipedia. Most of these facts about Franklin's life are ones we all had to learn in school. We may have also been exposed to some of his writings, generally his autobiography and some quotes from Poor Richard's Almanac, which he first published in 1733 and continued on through 1758. But there is a side of Benjamin Franklin that we are not exposed to in school, for better or for worse, depending upon your perspective, and quite likely the degree of your prudery. Franklin brought into his life a bawdry, scurrilous dimension of character that was all too eager to ignite the fires of controversy, and once ignited, fanned the flames until they burned brightly enough to please him. It is doubtful that Franklin thought of himself as either scandalous or roguish. He would have insisted that he just had a strong love for life, and delighted in mixing things up wherever possible. He wrote and published several outright hoaxes during his career, pieces with no basis whatsoever in reality, just to see how quickly his readers would recognize the hoax. In many cases, most readers failed the test completely. He also loved to write satires. During his days as a publisher of the Pennsylvania Gazette and Poor Richard's Almanac, most of his satire was directed at the domestic trials and tribulations of man and wife, and the foibles of society. Look up F-O-I-B-L-E-S, foibles. What's that mean? I need to know. As he became more involved in the colonial resistance to the rule of the crown, however, Franklin increasingly directed his satirical pen towards the pomposity of the English government and the ministers in charge of colonial affairs. Dry mouth. Pause for the cause. Continue. Fart Proudly, this book, is a testament to the satirical rogue that lived peaceably inside the philosopher and statesman. But it is more than that as well. It is a loving tribute to the ideal of free press in this country. Once upon a time, 200 years ago, people like Benjamin Franklin could write openly about all of the burning issues of their day. And when they wanted to express themselves pungently, because they were discussing an issue that offended their sense of smell, they were not afraid to use strong words, such as fart. Today, freedom of the press is only a nostalgic idea. It is a freedom, of course, that is still guaranteed by the Constitution, but it is a freedom in name only, because the newspapers, magazines, and broadcasting stations of our great nation have lost the courage to use this freedom. They have allowed themselves to be censored, not by the government, but by the horrid specter of social conformity and niceness. It is not nice to say fart in public, let alone actually let one fly. It might offend someone. Can't have that. It is also not nice to write about ideas anymore, if those ideas might possibly offend someone. Whether or not the ideas contain any truth is of no consequence. If some poor, downtrodden individual might be offended if an idea were put in print or uttered over the airwaves, then it cannot be written or stated. This past year, the government of Iran issued a death sentence to an author who had the audacity to write a book mildly critical of fundamentalist Islam. We all shuddered and rushed to condemn this obnoxious breach of freedom of the press. And yet the media in this country routinely refuse to let ideas that might offend our own special interest groups and minorities see the light of day. They don't kill anyone, of course. They just fire them or blackball them. The satires and songs included in this small book are not just funny pieces written 200 years ago by someone of historical importance. Each is a direct indictment of our free press, a silent statement that if Franklin had written it today and tried to have it published, it would probably be censored. Not because we dislike satire, but because we dislike controversy. We do not want to offend anyone anymore. We want to be polite. We want to be nice. Hell, we even want safe sex. Benjamin Franklin was a man who loved controversy. If there wasn't any, he would stir it up. During the time he had served as colonial agent, he was regarded by many people in England as the most dangerous man in America. Dun dun dun. Cue scary music. But do we honor this side of Franklin? Do we revere Franklin for the revolutionary, or the Franklin the patriarchal hero? This is a question you can answer for yourself. Give 10 of your closest friends this book as a present, and ask them to read it. 2 weeks later, it shouldn't take that long, but some people in modern America have forgotten how to read. Ask your 10 friends if they were exposed to any of these pieces in school. I will wager to you that not one of them was. It is the side of Benjamin Franklin that modern America wants to keep hidden. This book, however, is determined not to let that conspiracy succeed. If we are to preserve freedom in this country, we cannot afford to think of Benjamin Franklin as a kindly grandfather figure who went around saying, "A penny saved is a penny earned." We must recognize that a very important part of Franklin was his love of controversy and satire. This is what made him so dangerous. Above all, we cannot afford to think of Franklin as an antiseptic, prudish man. He was not. He was bawdy, roguish, and loved playing jokes on his friends, and when England grew oppressive, he was not afraid to rebel. Just so, when nature called, he farted. And he wasn't afraid to advocate that we all do the same.